This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
COVID-19 kills 2 Malawi cabinet ministers. South Africa closes borders amid rising coronavirus cases. And the number of coronavirus infections in Africa surpasses 3 million. Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us. This is Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Ramanyang joins me now with your latest business headlines.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Egypt has signed oil and gas exploration deals worth an estimated $1 billion. We'll have the details. And the World Bank is forecasting that Africa's largest economy may grow by just over 1% this year. We'll have the details on those stories and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Mahia.
Rama, thank you. We begin the hour in Malawi, where 2 high-ranking government officials, Linkson Belekanyama and Mohammed Siddiq Mia, have died from COVID-19. Belekanyama and Mia were serving as Malawi's ministers of local government and transport, respectively. The government has declared a 3-day national mourning period to remember the government officials and citizens who've died due to the pandemic. Malawi President Lazarus Chakwera has also declared a state of national disaster. Chakwera is appealing for more assistance from the international community, relevant United Nations agencies and non-governmental organizations for contributions towards the fight against COVID-19. Well, let's get more on that story now. We're joined by Mr. Kenneth Jali, a freelance reporter based in Blantyre, Malawi. Mr. Jali, what more can you tell us about the deaths of the 2 cabinet ministers?
Well, I must say that it has been a sad day in Malawi, and a lot of people don't actually believe that in a day a country like Malawi can lose 2 ministers to COVID-19. Well, it started early in the morning, around 6 a.m. Malawi time, when news on social media went around saying that Honorable Belekanyama had died due to COVID-19. And thereafter, around 10 a.m., news got around as well, indicating that Honorable Siddiq Mia, who is transport minister, who was transport minister rather in Malawi, also had died of COVID-19. It took the Minister of Information, Gospel Kazago, to come on one of the local radios in Malawi to communicate and confirm the deaths of the 2 ministers. And he actually expressed sadness of the president and the entire nation on the death of the 2 honorable ministers. He actually said that it is a sad day in Malawi, and government was doing all it can to make sure that COVID-19 is dealt with using resources it can find. Then thereafter in the afternoon, the president conducted a State of the Nation address, addressing the nation on the deaths of the 2 ministers and some of the means that Malawi and its partners are actually putting in place to deal away with COVID-19. The president actually observed a minute of silence and thereafter declared a state of disaster in all the 28 districts Malawi has, beginning from the northern part all the way to the southern part. So on top of that, he actually said that the country will be in 3 days of national mourning in respect of the departed ministers, and probably the country's flag should be flying at half-mast in respect to the departed ministers. And above all, the president stressed that the country is not so afraid of COVID-19. They're doing all they can. But one thing he did was to declare a state of national disaster in Malawi. That would actually lead into a state of emergency. Only that they were discussing whether to declare a state of emergency or a national disaster.
All right, Mr. Kenneth Jali, thank you very much for that. Freelance reporter from Blantyre, Malawi, Kenneth Jali, speaking to us following the deaths of 2 cabinet ministers in the country. Moving on, South Africa will temporarily close its land borders to curb the spread of COVID-19. This is one of the latest measures announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa. In a televised national address, Ramaphosa also announced that the country will remain on the same level of the lockdown at level 3. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela brings us the details.
Over the past few weeks, there has been heavy congestion at border posts. Travelers often spend hours in queues stretching several kilometers. The queues had been slowed down by coronavirus screening. Government believes that these border posts have now become areas of high risk of transmission and therefore should be closed, at least until February 15.
One of the challenges that we have as the festive season draws to a close is the huge congestion at many of our land border posts. This has exposed many people to infection as they wait to be processed, and it has been difficult to ensure that the health requirements for entry into South Africa are met, with many people arriving without proof of COVID-19 tests.
The border posts to be closed include Bait Bridge, which connects South Africa and Zimbabwe, Libombo, which provides entry into Mozambique, as well as the Maseru Bridge border post with Lesotho. Only specific circumstances under which travel will be allowed. These include the transport of goods and cargo, as well as the return of South African citizens and permanent residents. Other restrictions include the continuation of a complete ban on the sale of alcohol. Indoor and outdoor activities will also remain prohibited. The president implored South Africans to remain more vigilant as the new variant of the virus ravages parts of the country.
Emerging information suggests that this new variant does not cause more severe illness than the original variants. But it does put more pressure on the health system because the cases increase so rapidly and the hospitals get full much more quickly.
The president said South Africans should avoid what he calls the 3 C's, closed spaces, crowded spaces with others. He particularly railed against the attending of funerals.
We are in the grip of a deadly pandemic, and all those activities that would normally take place are just increasing our exposure to risk for ourselves and for the bereaved family and for our own families at home.
Under this level of lockdown, curfew will be from 9 p.m. and end at 5 a.m. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Zimbabwe has banned the transports between cities. This is part of a traditional burial rite in the country. The ban is among the measures by the government aimed at curbing the sharp rise in cases there. Here is Farai Mwakutuya with the details.
Zimbabwe has reached transmission level 4, meaning there are at least 150 COVID-19 cases per 100,000 people, turning the entire country into a pandemic hotspot.
The virus or the disease is everywhere. We can no longer say that it's concentrated in this town alone. We must know that this thing now has no boundaries. We can't say it will attack people on this day only.
The spread has strained the country's health system. Officials at Zimbabwe's largest referral hospital say they are overwhelmed by the sheer number of admissions due to COVID-19. A government official raised concerns that unless the number of infections is brought under control, facilities here and there could be overwhelmed. As cases rise, so too have the number of deaths due to COVID-19. Burials are believed to be spreading the disease, and so a ban on intercity travel for funerals has been imposed. Meanwhile, most businesses are shut and non-essential workers housebound under a 30-day lockdown, which despite its impact on livelihoods is seen as vital.
When we say it's a pandemic, it means it's an emergency. So we have to prioritize for our lives. Of course, yeah, hunger is something else, but you know, this condition is not for fun, and it's real. We have to, to follow the regulations and the rules so that we save our lives. Because of course, hunger we can always, strive. We can find other ways to survive, but with COVID, you can't.
Some people here are now pinning their hopes on vaccines, which the country is set to receive in February.
With the vaccine that we are going to receive, I think the cases will come down. Yes, the cases will come down. Will definitely come down with the vaccines that we are going to receive.
In the meantime, the government has released about $8.7 million to employ more health workers, procure essential PPEs and other supplies.
The government as well is rolling out rapid antigen testing for symptomatic patients. And this will go a long way in decongesting our emergency rooms and improving the triaging process.
It's also urging citizens to stop unnecessary movement so as to halt the unfolding health crisis. Mahia Mutua, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, let's take you back to South Africa, where earlier we'd mentioned that the country will temporarily close its land borders to curb the spread of COVID-19. This was announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa in a televised national address as part of the latest measures to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. For more on this, we can now go to Professor Patrick Bond, who is a political and economic analyst from the School of Governance at the University of Western Cape. Professor Bond, thank you for joining us. What is the impact of the land border closures to workers who are trying to return home at this time?
Well, you know, we've had for over a century a very, let's say, a reliant migrant labor system upon the entire region, not just within South Africa, as the mining industry had set up the trains and all sorts of relationships all across the sub-region through Malawi. And now the main border that you take, if you're on a bus or a car, you're going to go through Bridge, and there have been some terrible queues there. And indeed, even the last couple of days before last night's announcement of the closure, 4 or 5 days easily you would spend. And this is for thousands, because we have over 1 million Zimbabweans and many more Malawians. And there's a similar problem at the Lubombo border post between South Africa and Mozambique, and there were queues of 3 days there. Now, if you're a worker with a work permit, and you're a South African permanent resident, or you have South African citizenship, you can go through. They are keeping a small window open for you to jump through back over the border into South Africa. But many of the Zimbabweans, many Malawians are informal sector workers. And so now they've had to resort to the illegal border crossing. Quite a dangerous time, and shows the vulnerability of a regional political economy that's very integrated. Goods can go across, but they're now drawing the line on people.
And Professor, do we know at this time if there was a major danger of the South African variant of the COVID-19 disease spreading north from South Africa?
Yes, there certainly is. And it's partly because South Africans allowed the super spreaders to occur, both in funerals and parties in the December period, but also because the government hasn't subsidized the combi taxi industry to reduce the number of people per van. And that means that we now have here about 1.3 million positive cases, many, many more that they can't count. We have probably 60,000 deaths when you include excess deaths. Now that's about 60% of the entire continent's infections, with only 5% of the population. So now it's racing up continent as of December, and Zimbabwe is in a hotspot zone with a complete breakdown of some of the major hospitals. So it is very dangerous. And what's interesting is that they are allowing airlines to come in from the continent, although the main airline, SAA, has more or less broken down over the last 11 months. It hasn't flown. But you can fly in it. It costs 5 to 10 times as much as if you're going over the land border. So there's a little bit of a class bias. And then when workers come here, then they often get hit with xenophobia in the South African working class. So it's a very toxic mess at the moment, with very high rates of infection here in the major cities of South Africa, Cape Town, Johannesburg, and now especially Durban as well.
And staying on that, what is the situation with the status of flights into South Africa at this time?
Well, there are international flights, but you know, with the South African variant, there are a lot of countries around the world, including the sort of the major country, the old colonial power, Britain, that have more or less banned people from South Africa, or you have to have a couple of weeks in quarantine. So the major long distance flights are still going, but especially to the hub. And it is interesting because we had always thought, well, it was about 20 million passengers a year through OR Tambo in Johannesburg, and then the Cape Town airport is open, the Durban airport, they're all open to international visitors. But, you know, over time, the Middle Eastern hubs in the United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, and then Turkey have taken a large amount of the business, as have Ethiopian, and now we're going to see Qatar working with the Rwandans. So I think the reliance upon the OR Tambo airport as the main hub for this region will reduce, because it's geographically not that well located, and our main airline is because of corruption and mismanagement. So it's a very messy situation. We hope that 2021 brings vaccines and a sorting out of South Africa's relationship as it becomes a sort of sub-imperial power with all the privileges of drawing official workers from the region, but many of the, let's say, repressive techniques as well.
Professor, thank you very much for speaking to us on Africa Live. Professor Patrick Bond, a political analyst at the University of Western Cape, joining us live there. Moving to West Africa, Senegal is also facing a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic. Hospitals across the capital, Dakar, are dealing with a surge of COVID-19 patients. Asta Tal has more.
As day done and Professor Musa Saidi don their protective gear, they get ready for another day of rounds at Fan Hospital. Located in Dakar, the hospital has been among the hardest hit by the country's second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. While they maintain a calm demeanor as they check up on COVID-19 patients, Nurse Diane is concerned by the surge in cases.
We can say that we're a bit worried because we are here every day. We can say that sometimes there's fear and panic. We are more concerned for our families than ourselves, because here we can take the proper measures, but once we are home, we're afraid to infect our families, especially our children.
Since March, Senegal seemed to have a handle on containing the virus. Now, a lack of capacity has left doctors only able to admit severe cases. Professor Saidi understands this problem firsthand.
We have a meeting with the hospital director to open 10 fully equipped beds with all that is needed. We can even do reanimation. So the system is moving. It's being reactivated. Sometimes there is a rush in the numbers of patients. That increases much faster than the number of beds. We are trying to adapt. That's what needs to be done during a pandemic. That's what everyone is doing.
The surge in cases has led to President Macky Sall reimposing a curfew in Dakar and Thiès. The two urban regions account for 90% of the country's cases. Hopes now turn to the COVID-19 vaccines, though storage remains a major issue.
We have the necessary equipment centrally as well as regionally to store vaccines at temperatures between 2 degrees and 8 degrees Celsius. Now, if the choice leans towards RAM vaccines that need to be stored in very low temperatures between -70 and -80 degrees Celsius, they can't have the equipment available for storage.
As the country awaits the vaccines, hospitals continue to try to build their capacity to fight the virus. Asta Tal, CGTN.
Well, let's take a wide scope look at the impact of the disease across the African continent. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases from 55 African countries has now surpassed 3 million. Reported deaths in Africa have also gone up. CGTN's Nick Mudimba now gives us the latest figures as at 11th January in selected African countries.
COVID-19 pandemic has caused unprecedented public health and economic crisis. In the coming weeks and months, viral tests for the presence of COVID-19 infection as well as serological tests for antibodies and potential immunity will be crucial and critical to measure the spread of the disease globally. Let's now take a look at coronavirus cases in Africa. As at January 11th, cases of COVID-19 from 55 African countries have passed the 3 million mark. Reported deaths in Africa have also gone beyond the 70,000 mark. More than 2.4 million people have recovered from the disease. Now, South Africa has the highest number of reported cases at 1,231,597 and 33,163 people have died there. Other affected countries include Nigeria with 1,087 infections with 1,358 deaths. Morocco is another African country which has been hit hard by the pandemic with 452,532 infections with 7,743 deaths. Now, Egypt has a total of 149,792 infections with 8,197 deaths. Now, Tunisia, another North African country, has 159,276. And of course, the deaths in that country actually is 52,215. Now, let's move on to another country, which is, of course, Kenya, which has 98,334 cases. And, of course, deaths of that country is actually at 1,713. Ghana has 56,230 infections with 338 deaths. Uganda has 37,442 infections with 301 deaths. All this data is actually courtesy of the World Health Organization as well as other research portals, and most of the numbers are changing constantly.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. There's plenty more still to come over the course of the hour, including Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi pays official visit to Indonesia. And Ethiopia's National Defense Forces arrest at least 9 TPLF top officials.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us on Africa Live. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is on an official visit to Indonesia. This is Wang's second stop on his Southeast Asian tour after a 2-day visit to Myanmar. On Monday, Wang Yi met Myanmar's President Win Myint and State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi. Myanmar's leader thanked China for its support in combating the COVID-19 pandemic, and Wang promised 300,000 doses of a Chinese COVID-19 vaccine to the country. Regional cooperation, Wang Yi will next travel to Brunei and the Philippines. Silkina Aluwalia with more from Jakarta.
On Tuesday, Wang Yi and Luhut, Indonesia's Minister for Maritime Affairs and Investments, met in Lake Toba in North Sumatra. This is a very important meeting because both leaders discussed investments and projects that China are interested to be a part of, especially in the tourism industry. That area in North Sumatra is usually very crowded, but because of the pandemic, it's a little quiet, and as a result, Indonesia's tourism industry has been going through a very hard time. The government expects unemployment rate in the industry to reach an all-time high. They suspect more than 100,000 people will be laid off in that sector. So investments from China will definitely boost the tourism industry and also the country's economy. Aside from that, Minister Wang is also slated to meet Indonesia's Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi and, of course, President Joko Widodo on Wednesday to discuss trade and infrastructure investments, among other things. If we look at how both countries have progressed, this pandemic has shown that China and Indonesia's relationship runs way deeper than just trade and business.
Still in Indonesia, rescuers have retrieved one of the two black boxes that will help to determine what caused the Sriwijaya airplane crash 3 days ago. The flight data recorder has been transported to the Jakarta port. Officials say days to read the information, and they believe the cockpit voice recorder will be found soon. Rescuers say around 60 bags containing body parts have been handed over to authorities, and piles of debris of the plane have been dredged up. 62 people were aboard the jet when it plunged into the Java Sea on Saturday. Officials say the 27-year-old Boeing 737 passed an airworthiness inspection last month. Returning to the continent, the Ethiopian National Defense Forces have announced the arrest of at least 9 top officials from the Tigray People's Liberation Front, including the former president of the region, Abai Woldu, and the country's former Minister of the Economy, Abraham Tekest, who was also the deputy president of the TPLF. Leaders have been brought to Addis Ababa from the Tigray region. The government says those arrested will soon appear in court to face charges, which include terrorism and treason. These latest arrests are in addition to those made a few days back, which also included the group's founder.
After a long time and hard work, our army is finally capturing the rebel orchestrators, hunting them out from their hideouts, and we will continue our work until the rest of them are fully apprehended.
And still in East Africa, maize farmers are finding it increasingly harder to make money given at the prices offered by the National Cereals and Produce Board have been recently been greatly reduced. They are now opting to sell their maize directly to the market at better prices. CGTN's Nick Mudimba has that report.
Maize farming was for a long time cherished by many farmers in Kenya's Uasin Gishu County. But many farmers are now shifting to growing other cash crops or reducing the size of land under the maize crop. Kenya's National Cereals and Produce Board, which is run by the government, has not fully reopened its stores. This has forced maize farmers to look for other markets, a situation that has led to middlemen taking advantage of the farmers.
If the NCPB opens up at 3,000, okay, we will all rush to 3,000 and leave 1,800. And in the event that we rush, they will panic. The millers will panic.
Jesse Maize has been a maize farmer for more than 30 years, but for the first time, he's feeling the heat of price changes. He's adjusting maize, which he hopes will find a quick market and at favorable prices. But tough times lie ahead.
Yes, I used to plant 60 acres before, but now I'm planting only 20. Because of operation cost. I cannot afford to plant so much and sell. We are going down to almost 5 acres because we do not have protection.
The challenge we have in this country is that during harvest season, most of the farmers would like to offload their stocks to the market at one go. That usually creates a temporary glut, and that's why the prices come down. And also, we had some players in the industry who usually import a lot of maize during harvesting season, and also, worsening the situation in the market.
But technology and innovation might just be the solution for many farmers in the near future.
The price changes affect the farmers because primarily they are not making a profit, and they are forced to sell when the price is not usually right. So again, part of the mitigation, if we can introduce solutions such as the warehouse receipting mechanisms, which I know the Ministry of Agriculture is talking about here in Kenya and beyond. It's something that's also working in Ethiopia. This can actually help alleviate the problem and for the farmers to sell at the right price. The price generally is not always the problem. If you look at the value chain, how it works from end to end, is if your input cost is high, then of course that will also affect what your profit margins will be. Countries such as Tanzania have done very well to cushion farmers in terms of how they are able to substitute.
For now, the farmers are hopeful that the middlemen and brokers who are coming up with unfair prices will disappear, paving way for the government to open their stores that actually give them favorable prices. For now, they just have to work with what they have. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Uasin Gishu County, Kenya.
And crossing the border, Ugandan scientists are carrying out lab tests to determine why thousands of fish have died in Lake Victoria. And there are growing concerns what this latest development means for the fish export business, which generates tens of millions of dollars for the Ugandan economy. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
An unusual sight along the shores of Lake Victoria. Scores of dead Nile perch line the shores. It's of major concern for Ugandan scientists.
We're analyzing the pH, we're analyzing the temperatures, we're analyzing the oxygen levels, which we know are the most likely cause of this death in this fish. We have also looked at the chemical residues, the pesticide residues.
Preliminary investigations have so far ruled out poisoning. For close to a week now, huge volumes of dead fish have been washed to this shore. Fishermen here are worried that if this situation continues, they could lose out on their only source of income. The locals here say this is a natural currency which happens once a year.
What we know is that it is seasonal. Too much heat under the lake kills the fish.
But the scientists attribute the fish kill to drop in oxygen levels in the lake.
And it's associated with hypoxia. It is a time when we have some kind of strong storms. Normally it's around July, August when we have a lot of rough weather on the lake, and there's some mixing of water and oxygen levels drop. That's when we normally see, and it affects mainly Nile perch.
Scientists say despite this effect on fish, it's safe for consumption.
I want to assure our fish consumers, both domestic and international, that the fish from Lake Victoria is safe for human consumption. Because like I said, what we are not seeing is, if you look at the fish when their mouth wide open, that means they were gasping for oxygen at the time of death.
Fish is one of Uganda's top foreign exports. Figures from Bank of Uganda show that between January and July last year, the industry was worth more than $70 million. And authorities are worried that the current fish death on the lake could have a serious impact on revenue. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Entebbe, Central Uganda.
Thank you for staying with us on Africa Live. Ramanyang is back in studio to bring us all the latest from the world of business. Rama.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in business news. Egypt has signed oil and gas exploration deals worth an estimated $1 billion. And the World Bank is forecasting that Africa's largest economy may grow by just over 1% in 2021.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Let's start in North Africa, where authorities in Egypt have signed new agreements involving investment of about $1 billion to search for oil and natural gas at sea. Now, the deals are with six international and local companies, including ExxonMobil and Chevron. CGTN's Yasser Hakim highlights the importance of these deals and their significance for the North African state.
The gas and oil industry in Egypt continues to expand, with more investments channeled in the sector. The latest agreements target drilling 23 wells in 9 regions in the Mediterranean and 3 at the Red Sea. According to Egypt's oil ministry, the total investments could exceed $1.4 billion.
For the first time, ExxonMobil and Chevron, 2 major international players, are involved in Egypt. Their strong status and financial power means faster production and quicker results in excavation. Egypt is moving on a fast and steady pace to increase production up with the level of consumption for oil and gas.
According to experts, the gas discoveries in East Mediterranean in the last few years, like the huge Dor well, have encouraged international companies to invest in Egypt. Meanwhile, just like it did with natural gas, the North African country is aiming to close the gap between production and consumption in oil.
The consumption of butane, diesel and fuel has dropped due to the gradual conversion to locally produced natural gas, waste or housing units. 1.2 million housing units have been converted to natural gas every year. This has a positive impact on the economy because less imports of oil and petroleum products means less expenditure and so an improved balance of payments.
The recent growth and success of the oil and gas sector has also generated a large inflow of hard currency from international oil firms. This has helped prop the foreign currency reserves and given a boost to the overall economy in a time when there has been a global recession caused by the COVID-19 downturn. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The World Bank is forecasting that Nigeria's economy may grow by 1.1% this year and just barely emerge from 2020's recession. Africa's largest oil producer slid into a recession last year. That's the second such recession in 4 years, as the COVID-19 pandemic devastated consumer spending, investment and foreign currency earnings. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has the details.
Nigeria's economy was buffeted by low revenue receipts, inflation and a weak foreign exchange for most part of 2020. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, however, became the breaking point, tumbling Africa's largest economy into recession. Now the World Bank has pegged growth rate at 1.1% as the economy prepares for recovery by the last quarter of 2021. But how realistic is this projection for the West African economy?
Advantage, it's easier for Nigeria economy and economies like Nigeria economy to get into positive growth than developed economies because the gap, the economy still have window for expansion. But essentially, even if we recover from the recession, the economy will still be very, very, very bad in terms of both the productivity, in terms of GDP growth, in terms of revenue available to finance capital investment, and also in terms of household income. So it's a terrible time.
The moment we get an informal sector, if the moment we formalize it, then you'll be able to see it, because it's all about revenue, really. Okay, it's all about access to credit. Okay, it's all about job security. Okay, so the moment you're able to get job security, the moment you're able to get more people into employment, okay, your economy will grow. That's the point I'm trying to make. So we shouldn't be excited or otherwise at a 1.1% growth.
For the first 9 months of 2020, cumulative GDP contracted by 2.48%. Year on year in real terms, the economy contracted by 3.62%. The last time Nigeria slid into recession was in 2016. The country was recovering slowly until the advent of COVID-19, which necessitated a lockdown to curb the pandemic amid dwindling oil revenue. Nigeria, which is Africa's leading oil producer and exporter, depends on crude oil for 90% of its export revenue. but average crude oil production's been cut by about 30%. While anticipating the positive growth of Nigeria's economy, its government to invest in other key sectors expected to drive recovery.
There's been an increasing contribution of agriculture to GDP has been increasing. If government improves its agro-reform, some of the agro-reform initiatives in the economic sustainability plan, we see agriculture maybe make some contribution. Other area depend on how they manage its entertainment, the service sector.
You can't do agriculture without energy. You can't do sustainable agriculture without water resources. You can't do sustainable agriculture without transportation, infrastructure. Focus more on technical education. That's it. Okay? Let us begin to return all those technical institutions to service anywhere they are. The moment you have technically competent persons, with the AFT, after now, coming on board, now these skills are even in much more higher demand.
The World Bank's prediction is dependent on the availability of early COVID-19 vaccines in the country, more so as the second wave of the pandemic sweeps across the globe. What's more, smart policy making is identified to be at the heart of Nigeria's economic rebound. Now, economic watchers are proposing policies that encourage private sector investment and activity stimulation. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
South Africa's liquor industry is warning of a rise in illicit liquor sales and looming job losses due to the country's ban on alcohol sales in South Africa as it struggles to contain the continent's biggest outbreak of COVID-19. As the country's caseload has risen over 1.24 million, South African breweries approached the courts seeking to have the ban declared unconstitutional. As CGTN's Sumitra Naidu now explains, the brewers are arguing that the loss of livelihoods right across the supply chain will be devastating.
The liquor industry is a major employer and an important contributor to our economy. Our priority at this time, however, must be to save lives. Reckless behavior due to alcohol intoxication has contributed to increased transmission. Alcohol-related accidents and violence are putting pressure on our emergency units.
Despite the dire economic impact of another ban on alcohol, government decided it needed to be done. The liquor last two bans in 2020, South African Breweries, which produces the bulk of the country's beer, says around 165,000 jobs have been lost. But it's the small traders that have been hit the hardest.
The sad thing is, you are not being even noticed. You're not even being given a notice that we are going to close. It's just a shutdown, immediate effect, And you have people, remember it's a new business, so you have people that you need to pay, you have a rent that you need to pay, your landlord doesn't understand, workers are frustrated.
Workers are hoping the ban stays in place as they're battling to cope with the influx of patients suffering with the new variant of COVID. The latest ban took effect just days before the new year, providing some relief to hospitals. South Africa the courts to have the ban overturned. The industry believes around 100,000 people moved into poverty as a direct result of the last alcohol ban.
We just want to open because government is not even helping us. Our kids are suffering. Schools are opening very soon. I'm relying on this money. At this given moment, we don't have money. We are even scared that the landlord can take over the business because you don't even have money to pay for the rent.
South Africa has the worst COVID infection rate on the continent, and a vaccine may only arrive in the second quarter of this year. The liquor ban is meant to prevent further deaths, but without an income that puts food on the table, thousands of people might still die without contracting COVID. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
The art of origami could provide a way for the fashion industry to cut waste, but also help parents save money when they're buying kids' clothes. One firm is introducing clothes designed to adjust to the shapes of fast-growing children in the hope of business of fast fashion. CGTN's Beryl Oro takes up that story.
London-based startup Petit Pli, which is French for little pleat, designs children's clothes with an innovative pleat system that lets them grow with the child, expanding in multiple directions but also able to contract back to their original size.
Petit Pli exists because the fashion industry is the world's second largest polluter, and we already know what one of the solutions is, and that is to extend the life and use of clothes, and that's the best way we can reach our carbon, water and waste emission targets by 2030.
According to Yasin, children grow 7 clothes sizes during their first 2 years, meaning parents are left with a lot of clothes that have barely been worn before they are too small for the child.
When I first showed my niece the garment that expands, she was around 3 years old, and so the garments in their condensed state looked too small. When I opened it for her, she just gasped with excitement, and I think that element of magic truly captured what innovation can be.
With a background as an aeronautical engineer specializing in deployable structures, Yasin's outfits structure in fabric that was inspired by the ancient Japanese art origami.
This involved a lot of research into origami structures and folds and stowing away as much material as possible into a small gap and then having that deploy out in space. And that has really filtered down into this design.
Petit Pli featured in 2017's Global Grand Show, which showcases students' ideas for social impact to solve the environmental, social and economic issues facing the world.
What if you could have a garment which has temperature properties which are far beyond what our standard cheap clothing can achieve? What if you could have one garment which really truly does keep you dry and cool in summer and also dry and warm in winter, where it's adapting? Or what if you could have a garment which morphs in its shape for different social stuff?
One set of Petit Pli clothes currently fits a child for more than 3 years, growing through 7 distinct sizes before being reset back to the smallest size and passed on to the next infant or sibling. The company is now also experimenting with prints to hide daily stains and exploring adult wear and non-children's wear application. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be looking at Eastern traders. They're pushing for a uniform cost of COVID-19 tests and quarantine regulations in all member states of that particular bloc. But how exactly will that be achieved? And more importantly, who'll pay for it? We'll explore that live from Arusha at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Mahia.
Rama, thank you. Well, here's what's still to come in the sports. Hosts Egypt target podium finish in the first ever 32-team World Handball Championship.